She was the Soaring Crane, an advanced weapon that helped cripple the United States Pacific Fleet. But how did this powerful Japanese aircraft carrier meet her end? And what secrets did she take to the depths? Today, we explore the story of the Imperial Japanese Navy's Shokaku, a warship that carved a fearsome reputation across the vast battlegrounds of World War II. Shokaku, meaning soaring crane, was more than just a name. It was a promise of grace and deadly striking power. Alongside her sister ship Zuikaku, the auspicious crane, she represented the pinnacle of Japanese carrier design as the world teetered on the brink of global conflict. These vessels were built in secrecy, symbols of an empire's ambition, and destined to play pivotal roles in some of the most savage naval battles ever fought. Shokaku's career was a tumultuous saga of spectacular victories, devastating damage, improbable survival, and ultimately a fiery demise. She was a warship that witnessed the height of Japanese naval dominance and its subsequent brutal decline, her own fate intertwined with the destiny of an empire. This is the story of a carrier that was formidable, resilient, yet ultimately flawed, a testament to the unforgiving nature of war at sea. The genesis of the Shokaku and her sister, Zuikaku, lies in Japan's strategic ambitions of the 1930s. Freed from the constraints of the Washington Naval Treaty and subsequent London naval treaties, which had limited the size and number of capital ships, Japanese naval architects were given a relatively free hand. The result was the Shokaku-class, designed to be the most powerful aircraft carriers of their day. Laid down at the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal on December 12, 1937, Shokaku was launched on June 1, 1939, and formally commissioned into the Imperial Japanese Navy, or IJN, on August 8, 1941, just 4 months before the Pacific War erupted. These were not small vessels. Shokaku displaced around 2,575 long tons, that's about 26,087 metric tons, at standard load, and over 32,000 long tons, or 3,512 metric tons when fully laden for war. She stretched 844 feet, 9 inches, roughly 257.5 meters, in overall length with a beam of 85 feet, 4 inches, that's 26 meters. Her sheer size allowed her to carry a formidable air group. While the exact composition varied, she typically operated around 72 aircraft with a maximum capacity for 84. This air group was a lethal mix of Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters, HE D3A Val dive bombers, and Nakajima B5N Kate torpedo bombers, aircraft that would soon become infamous across Allied fleets. Powering this behemoth were Kampon-geared steam turbines, generating a staggering 16,000 shaft horsepower, driving 4 propellers. This gave Shokaku an impressive top speed of over 34 knots, around 63 kilometers per hour, making her one of the fastest carriers in the world, capable of keeping pace with swift cruiser escorts and rapidly deploying her air power. Her range was also considerable, approximately 9,700 nautical miles, that's 18,000 kilometers, at a cruising speed of 18 knots, or 33 kilometers per hour. Protection was a key consideration, at least in theory. She featured a waterline armor belt up to 8.5 inches, or 215 millimeters, thick over her machinery and magazines, and her flight deck, while not fully armored in the British style, did have some protective plating. However, the design incorporated some features that would later prove to be critical vulnerabilities. Her hangar sides were deliberately made flimsy, intended to vent the force of an internal explosion outwards rather than containing it. More significantly, her aviation fuel tanks and distribution systems were not as well protected or isolated as those in contemporary Allied carriers, a flaw that would have catastrophic consequences. Her island superstructure was located on the starboard side, and in a distinctive Japanese design feature, her funnels were trunked together and angled downwards and outwards to keep smoke clear of the flight deck. When compared to her contemporaries, Shokaku stood tall. The American Yorktown-class carriers were broadly similar in size and capability, though they would prove to have better damage control and internal protection philosophies. The British Illustrious-class carriers, with their heavily armored flight decks, traded aircraft capacity for survivability. Shokaku and Zuikaku, forming Carrier Division 5, were seen as a significant enhancement to the IJN's Kido Butai, the main carrier striking force, which already boasted formidable carriers like Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. As 1941 drew to a close, Shokaku and her untested air crews were thrust into the crucible of war. Under the command of Captain Takatsugu Jojima, she sortied with the Kido Butai for the audacious attack on Pearl Harbor. On the morning of December 7, 1941, aircraft from Shokaku and her 5 carrier compatriots struck the unprepared American naval base and surrounding airfields on Oahu. Shokaku's first wave contingent consisted of VAL dive bombers targeting Wheeler Field and Hickam Field, aiming to neutralize American air power on the ground. Her Zeros provided escort and strafed airfields. The attack was a stunning tactical success for Japan, and Shokaku's air group performed effectively, suffering minimal losses. The Soaring Crane had bloodied her talons in her very first operation, returning to Japan unscathed, part of a seemingly invincible armada. The early months of 1942 saw the IJN rampage across Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Shokaku was at the forefront of these operations. In January 1942, she supported the invasion of Rabaul in New Britain, followed by attacks on Lae and Salamaua in New Guinea. In April, Carrier Division 5, comprising Shokaku and Zuikaku, was detached from the main body of the Kido Butai and dispatched into the Indian Ocean. This raid, led by Admiral Trichi Nagumo, though he was with the main body of carriers Akagi, Soryu, Hiryu, was intended to disrupt British naval forces and shipping, and to protect the flank of Japanese operations in Burma. Operating in the Bay of Bengal, Shokaku's aircraft, alongside those from Zuikaku and other carriers, wreaked havoc. On April 5, they attacked Colombo in Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, and on April 9, they struck Trincomalee. During these operations, they famously caught and sank the British light aircraft carrier HMS Hermes, the first carrier designed as such to be sunk in action. They also sent the heavy cruisers HMS Cornwall and HMS Dorsetshire to the bottom, along with numerous merchant ships. The Indian Ocean raid was another resounding success, showcasing the reach and lethality of Japanese naval aviation. Shokaku had, in a few short months, established herself as a key asset of a navy that appeared unbeatable. But the tide of war is ever shifting, and the first true test for Shokaku, and for the entire concept of carrier versus carrier warfare, was fast approaching. In May 1942, the Japanese launched Operation MO, an ambitious plan to seize Port Moresby in New Guinea. Capturing Port Moresby would isolate Australia and extend Japan's defensive perimeter. Allied intelligence, thanks to codebreakers, became aware of the Japanese intentions, and Task Force 17, centered on the American carriers USS Lexington and USS Yorktown, was dispatched to intercept. The resulting Battle of the Coral Sea, fought from May 4 to May 8, 1942, was historic. It was the first naval battle in history where the opposing surface fleets never made direct visual contact. All the fighting was conducted by carrier aircraft. Shokaku and Zuikaku formed the main Japanese striking force. On May 7, Japanese aircraft mistakenly attacked and sank the U.S. destroyer Sims and the oiler Neosho, believing them to be a carrier and a cruiser. The following day, May 8, the main action commenced. Aircraft from Shokaku and Zuikaku located the American carriers. In a coordinated attack, Shokaku's Vals and Kates, alongside Zuikaku's, pounced on the U.S. fleet. They scored multiple torpedo hits and bomb hits on USS Lexington, affectionately known as Lady Lex, leaving her mortally wounded and eventually scuttled. USS Yorktown was also damaged by a bomb. However, the Americans struck back hard. Aircraft from Lexington and Yorktown found Shokaku. While Zuikaku managed to evade detection in a rain squall, Shokaku bore the brunt of the American counterattack. She was struck by 3 1,000-pound, that's approximately 453-kilogram, bombs. One hit the forward flight deck, another struck near the bridge, and a third hit aft. The damage was severe. Massive fires erupted, her flight deck was mangled, and she suffered over 100 casualties. Captain Jojima skillfully managed to control the fires and keep his ship afloat, a testament to the dedication of his crew and the fundamental toughness of the ship's construction. However, Shokaku was crippled, unable to launch or recover aircraft, and was forced to withdraw from the battle, listing heavily and trailing smoke. She limped back to Kure, Japan, for extensive repairs. The Battle of the Coral Sea was a complex affair. Tactically, the Japanese could claim a victory, having sunk more tonnage, including a large fleet carrier. Strategically, however, it was an Allied victory. The invasion of Port Moresby was thwarted, but the most significant consequence for the IJN was the absence of both Shokaku and Zuikaku from the pivotal Battle of Midway just 1 month later. Shokaku was in dock undergoing repairs that would take until late August. Zuikaku, though undamaged, had suffered heavy losses to her air group at Coral Sea and could not muster a replacement contingent in time. The absence of these two powerful carriers, with their experienced air crews, is considered by many historians to be a crucial factor in the catastrophic Japanese defeat at Midway, a battle that irrevocably shifted the balance of naval power in the Pacific. One can only speculate what difference their presence might have made. After nearly 3 months of repairs at Kure, Shokaku was ready for action again. She rejoined the fleet in late August 1942, now part of the reformed 1st Carrier Division. The focus of the Pacific War had shifted to the Solomon Islands, particularly the fierce struggle for Guadalcanal. Shokaku was soon thrown back into the maelstrom. Her first major engagement post-repair was the Battle of the Eastern Solomons on August 24 and 25, 1942. This battle arose from a Japanese attempt to reinforce their troops on Guadalcanal and destroy American naval forces. Shokaku and Zuikaku, supported by the light carrier Ryujo, engaged the American carriers USS Enterprise and USS Saratoga. During the battle, Shokaku's aircraft contributed to damaging USS Enterprise with several bomb hits. Ryujo was sunk, and the Japanese reinforcement convoy was forced to turn back. While not a decisive victory for either side, the battle further depleted Japan's pool of veteran pilots. Shokaku herself escaped major damage this time. 2 months later, the relentless pace of carrier warfare continued with the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, fought on October 26, 1942. This was another savage encounter linked to the Guadalcanal campaign. Shokaku, Zuikaku, and the light carrier Zuiho, along with their escorts, clashed with an American force built around USS Hornet and a damaged but operational USS Enterprise. The battle was one of the hardest-fought carrier duels of the war. Japanese aircraft, including those from Shokaku, located and attacked the American carriers with grim determination. They crippled USS Hornet with multiple bomb and torpedo hits. Hornet would later be abandoned and sunk by Japanese destroyers. USS Enterprise was also damaged again, as were the battleship USS South Dakota and the cruiser USS San Juan. However, this success came at a terrible cost to Shokaku. While her aircraft were savaging the American fleet, American dive bombers, primarily from USS Hornet before she was incapacitated, found Shokaku. Despite evasive maneuvers, she was struck by at least 4, and possibly as many as 6, 1,000-pound bombs. The damage was catastrophic, arguably more severe than what she had sustained at Coral Sea. Her flight deck was shattered and buckled, rendering it completely inoperable. Devastating fires raged below decks. Once again, her crew fought heroically to save their ship. Captain Nojima, still in command, managed to keep her afloat, but she was a wreck. Shokaku was forced to withdraw, barely making it back to Truk and then to Japan for another round of extensive repairs. The Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands was a tactical victory for the Japanese in terms of ships sunk and damaged, but it was a Pyrrhic one. They lost nearly 100 aircraft, and critically, many irreplaceable veteran aircrews. The American losses were also heavy, but their capacity to replace pilots and aircraft was far greater. Shokaku would be out of action for 9 long months. The period from late 1942 through 1943 and into early 1944 was one of rebuilding and refitting for Shokaku. The nature of the Pacific War was changing rapidly. The United States' industrial might was now in full swing, producing ships, aircraft, and trained personnel at a rate Japan simply could not match. The IJN, which had started the war with arguably the best naval aviators in the world, was suffering from crippling attrition. Experienced pilots were dying in combat and not being replaced by men of similar caliber due to deficiencies in Japan's training pipeline. During her lengthy repair period, Shokaku received significant upgrades. Her anti-aircraft armament was substantially increased, with numerous additional 25mm automatic cannons being installed in single, double, and triple mounts. She also received her first radar set, a Type 21 air search radar mounted atop her island. This was a crucial addition, though Japanese radar technology generally lagged behind that of the Allies. Once her repairs and refits were complete, Shokaku spent much of her time in home waters or at Truk, primarily engaged in training new aircrews. These pilots, while brave, lacked the skill and experience of their predecessors who had fought in 1941 and 1942. The Soaring Crane was preparing for her final, desperate battles. By June 1944, the strategic situation for Japan was dire. American forces were relentlessly advancing across the Central Pacific, targeting the Mariana Islands. The capture of Saipan, Tinian, and Guam would put US B-29 Superfortress bombers within range of the Japanese home islands. For the IJN, this was a line that could not be crossed. They mustered almost all their remaining naval strength for a decisive battle, codenamed Operation A-Go. Shokaku, now under the command of Captain Hiroshi Matsubara, sailed as part of Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's mobile fleet, the IJN's main carrier striking force. The ensuing Battle of the Philippine Sea, fought on June 19 and 20, 1944, would become infamous as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The American Fifth Fleet, commanded by Admiral Raymond Spruance, was vastly superior in numbers of ships and aircraft, and its aviators were better trained and equipped than their Japanese counterparts. On June 19, Ozawa launched multiple waves of aircraft against the American fleet. These attacks were met by swarms of American F-6F Hellcat fighters, guided by radar and expert fighter direction. The results were catastrophic for the Japanese. Hundreds of Japanese aircraft were shot down, with minimal American losses. It was a slaughter. Amidst this aerial carnage, Shokaku's fate was sealed not by aircraft, but by an unseen enemy lurking beneath the waves. While steaming in the Philippine Sea, engaged in launching and recovering aircraft, Shokaku was spotted by the American submarine USS Kavala, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Herman J. Kostler. At around 11:20 a.m. on June 19, Kavala fired a spread of 6 torpedoes at the Japanese carrier. 3, possibly 4, of these torpedoes struck Shokaku on her starboard side, near the forward aviation fuel tanks. The impacts were devastating. The torpedo hits ruptured fuel lines and tanks, and volatile aviation gasoline vapors quickly spread throughout the ship. Fires broke out almost immediately and began to rage uncontrollably. The crew, many of whom were relatively inexperienced, struggled to implement damage control procedures under horrific conditions. The lessons from Coral Sea and Santa Cruz regarding aviation fuel vulnerability had not been fully addressed in her design or refits. As Shokaku slowed, listing to starboard, the internal fires reached ammunition magazines or fuel storage, triggering a series of internal explosions. Shortly after 3 p.m., a massive explosion ripped through the carrier. The Soaring Crane, which had twice before cheated death, could take no more. She broke up and sank rapidly, bow first, taking 1,272 officers and men to their graves, including Captain Matsubara, who chose to go down with his ship. Approximately 570 of her crew were rescued by the cruiser Yahagi and destroyer Urakaze. On the same day, the new Japanese carrier Taiho, Ozawa's flagship, was also sunk by a single torpedo from another U.S. submarine, USS Albacore, due to similar catastrophic internal explosions from aviation fuel. The loss of Shokaku, Taiho, and Hio, sunk by air attack the next day, along with over 600 aircraft and their crews, shattered Japanese naval aviation. The Battle of the Philippine Sea was an unmitigated disaster from which the IJN would never recover as an effective carrier force. The legacy of IJN Shokaku is that of a truly formidable warship, one of the finest aircraft carriers produced by Japan during World War II. Her combat record was impressive. She participated in the attack on Pearl Harbor, the Indian Ocean Raid, the Battle of the Coral Sea, the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, and her final engagement, the Battle of the Philippine Sea. She was at the heart of the IJN's most significant operations for the first 3 years of the war. Her design incorporated great speed and a powerful air group. She also demonstrated remarkable resilience, surviving incredibly heavy damage in 2 major battles, Coral Sea in Santa Cruz and managing to return to port. This speaks to the fundamental strength of her hull and the bravery of her crews. However, her story also highlights critical flaws common in Japanese carrier design of the era, particularly inadequate protection and isolation of aviation fuel systems, and less effective damage control doctrine compared to the U.S. Navy. These vulnerabilities, coupled with the declining quality of her aircrews and the overwhelming industrial might of the Allies, ultimately sealed her fate. Shokaku, the Soaring Crane, remains a potent symbol of Japan's naval prowess in World War II, a warrior that fought fiercely from the dawn of the conflict until its brutal, fiery climax. Her tale is a stark reminder of the thin line between triumph and disaster in the unforgiving theater of war at sea, where even the mightiest titans can be brought low by a determined foe and the ever-present threat of fire and steel. So, the Shokaku, a ship that truly lived up to her name, soaring to incredible heights of victory before her final, dramatic plunge. What aspect of her story do you find most compelling? Was it her resilience, her deadly effectiveness, or the tragic flaws that led to her demise? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We're always on the hunt for tales of incredible machines and forgotten battles, so if there's a warbird, warship, iron horse, or a legendary figure you think deserves the spotlight, drop your mission briefing in the comments. Your suggestions help us chart our next course into history. And if you're fascinated by these deep dives into military history and want to ensure you catch every single one, make sure you've hit that subscribe button and dinged the notification bell. We've got a whole flotilla of stories waiting to be told.